The hurricane had arrived without mercy, tearing through the Gulf Coast with the roar of 1,000 freight trains. It snapped tree limbs like twigs, flooded streets, and stripped rooftops from homes. In the small town of Calhoun, Louisiana, nestled near the Kisatchie National Forest, families huddled in basements and storm shelters as the sky turned a bruised, ominous green. Amid it all, the animals of the forest fled or burrowed, except for those caught in the fury. High above the forest, on a lone, gnarled pine at the edge of Bayou d'Arbonne, a juvenile bald eagle clung to the shredded remnants of its nest. He had been born of the early spring, one of 2 hatchlings, but the only one to survive the competition for food. His mother had vanished weeks before, and his father hadn't returned since the first dark clouds had crept over the bayou. He was too young to fly far, but old enough to try. As the wind howled and rain lashed like daggers, he leapt into the air, more instinct than strategy, and was immediately flung sideways. His wing twisted at an impossible angle. He crashed through this canopy, smacked against a fallen cypress, and finally landed hard in the muddy underbrush, half submerged, wings splayed, gasping. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving silence in its wake. The townspeople emerged from their shelters to find downed power lines, debris-strewn roads, and collapsed barns. Among them was 12-year-old Noah Carter, whose family owned a small veterinary clinic on the edge of town. As soon as the storm cleared, he'd begged his mom to let him ride out with her while she checked on the animals at the shelter. "Noah," she warned, carefully maneuvering their dusty SUV over a tree-rooted road. "We're not sightseeing. I need to focus." "I know," he said, eyes scanning the woods. "But if we see anything hurt, like wild animals, can we stop?" She glanced at him, softening. "If it's safe." They didn't expect to find anything. The forest seemed eerily calm. But a mile down the muddy service road near the edge of the marsh, Noah spotted something from the window. A shape, dark, motionless, curled beneath a curtain of hanging moss. "Mom, stop!" he shouted. "Back up!" "Noah, please, I saw something. I swear." His mother reversed cautiously. Noah jumped out before the wheels had stopped. He sprinted to the figure, heart thudding. It was a bird, but not just any bird. An eagle. A juvenile bald eagle, maybe 2 feet long, soaked to the bone, panting shallowly. One wing jutted out at a strange angle, feathers torn and bloodied. "Noah, careful!" his mom called, approaching. Her voice changed as she got closer. "Oh my God, it's an eagle!" "He's alive," Noah whispered, kneeling. "Mom, we have to help him." She crouched beside him, examining the bird with the practiced eyes of a wildlife-trained vet. "His wing is fractured, maybe worse. Can we take him back, please?" For a long moment she said nothing. The eagle blinked slowly, helpless and wild. Finally she nodded. "We'll try, but it's going to be very difficult, Noah. He might not make it." They wrapped the eagle in a towel and placed him gently in a pet carrier. Noah sat in the back seat beside him, barely breathing, watching every tiny movement. He didn't know it yet, but this young eagle, who would later be named Valor, was going to change his life. The Carter Veterinary Clinic was a modest white building just outside Calhoun, surrounded by tall grass and 2 ancient oak trees. The hurricane had left it mostly intact, just some minor roof damage and a broken sign. Inside, backup generators hummed softly, powering essential systems. The clinic had no electricity otherwise, but it had everything Dr. Elaine Carter needed: surgical equipment, cages, supplies, and her son Noah, who was already washing his hands for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. They had laid the eagle on a thick towel in the observation room. His breathing was still shallow, his wings still twisted and bloodied. Every time he moved, his claws flexed involuntarily. Noah stayed close, his wide eyes never leaving the bird. "Don't crowd him," Elaine said gently. She was already gloved and had begun her exam. "He's badly dehydrated, and that wing, it's a compound fracture, right through the humerus. Torn muscle, too." "Can you fix it?" Noah asked, voice trembling. Elaine sighed. "Maybe, but I'm not an avian surgeon. This is different from working on cats or dogs, or even hawks. Bald eagles are federally protected. I'd have to contact the Wildlife Service, maybe transfer him to Shreveport." "But that's 2 hours away," Noah protested. "He might not make it that long." "I know." She paused, brushing a strand of dark hair from her forehead. "That's why I'm going to stabilize him here. If he survives the night, We'll make a plan in the morning. Noah swallowed hard and nodded. They worked together in silence, a practiced routine. Elaine cleaned the wound, gave him fluids via a small catheter, and applied a temporary splint. Noah held a flashlight steady, his hand never shaking. The eagle, still unnamed, flinched and whimpered as the gauze was wrapped around his wing, but he never tried to bite. He was too weak. His eyes, though, were fiercely alive, watching. By evening, the worst was done. Elaine tucked him into a soft enclosure, lined with blankets and warmed by a heat pad, and dimmed the lights. "We'll call him Valor," Noah said suddenly. Elaine looked at him. "Valor?" "Because he didn't give up, even after falling." A small smile tugged at her mouth. "It's fitting." Noah refused to go home. He rolled out a sleeping bag in the office and camped beside the enclosure, his head resting on a pillow just inches from the eagle's line of sight. He whispered stories about school, about the hurricane, about how he'd always wanted to see a real eagle. Valor didn't respond, but somehow Noah felt he was listening. Rain pattered on the roof all night. The trees creaked. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, a reminder that recovery had just begun. But inside the clinic, under the soft hum of generators and Noah's quiet voice, a fragile bond had begun to form. At 3:17 a.m., Noah woke to a sound. Scratching. Valor was moving. His good wing fluttered gently, and his beak opened slightly, as if he were testing his voice. Noah sat up slowly. "Hey," he whispered. "You're okay. You're safe." Valor blinked once, then he closed his eyes again. That moment would stay with Noah forever. A silent promise had passed between them. "I saved you. Now we heal together." By sunrise, the clouds had finally broken, letting warm light pour over the soaked earth like a promise of redemption. Dew clung to the tall grass outside the clinic. The town was waking up. Chainsaws echoed through the streets as neighbors cleared trees, and emergency crews passed by in trucks, their orange lights flashing. Inside the Carter Veterinary Clinic, a new day was beginning, with cautious optimism. Valor had survived the night. Elaine was the first to check on him. Her trained fingers gently tested his pulse, his temperature, the firmness of his body. She expected the worst: infection, shock, immobility. Instead, she found a heartbeat, thin but steady, and a small lift of the head as she entered. "Well, you're a fighter," she murmured. Noah, already awake and halfway through his third granola bar, leaned over. "He looks stronger, right?" Elaine nodded slowly. "Maybe, but this is just the beginning." She reached for her phone and dialed the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. The man on the other end was kind, but firm. "Normally, we'd send someone to pick him up and transfer him to the Raptor Center in Baton Rouge. But post-storm logistics are a mess. Roads are blocked, staff are spread thin. Can you hold him there for at least 3 more days?" Elaine hesitated. "I can keep him stable, but he needs surgery, real avian surgery." "We'll do what we can on our end," the man said. "You might want to reach out to Dr. Reed in Monroe. He's one of the best in the state for birds of prey." Elaine made a note and thanked him. That afternoon, after examining X-rays she managed to capture on the clinic's still-functioning imaging system, Elaine sighed deeply. "It's worse than I thought," she told Noah. "Clean break through the bone, but there's muscle tearing around the joint and some tissue necrosis starting." Noah looked at the screen. Even he, at 12, could see it. A jagged line, displacement, and something that looked wrong. "But can it be fixed?" he asked. "It can be repaired," she said carefully. "But that doesn't guarantee he'll fly again." Noah's face fell. "I didn't say he wouldn't," she added quickly. "Just that it won't be easy. Birds like Valor, they rely on perfect symmetry. A few degrees off in his wing, and he'll never soar." Noah looked at Valor, who lay quietly in his enclosure, blinking at the world with sharp amber eyes. "But if anyone can do it, it's you, right?" Elaine gave a soft laugh. "I'm not a miracle worker, but I can try." That evening, she called Dr. Reed in Monroe. After describing the situation, he agreed to help, but couldn't come for at least 2 days. He was overwhelmed with storm-related cases and working double shifts. "Send me the images," he said. "I'll prep for a full pinning and muscle repair. If you can keep him stable, I'll operate as soon as I arrive." Elaine sent the files and hung up. She turned to her son. "You heard him. 2 days. I'll stay here with him, Noah said immediately. I thought you might. The next 48 hours were slow, tense, and filled with small victories. Valor began eating soft strips of fish, first reluctantly, then with determination. Noah logged every bite, every movement. He even charted blinking patterns and rest periods, as if he were the eagle's own personal nurse. At night, he whispered stories to him again, this time about bravery in the sky. You know, you're supposed to fly higher than any bird, Noah said softly on the second night. Over rivers, mountains, even clouds. But maybe you'll just fly over Louisiana first. That's okay. I'll be with you. Valor closed his eyes slowly. On the third morning, Dr. Reed finally arrived. Older, lean, with sharp gray eyes and hands that had repaired dozens of birds. He looked over the x-rays, examined Valor, and nodded. It's bad, he said. But he's lucky. And young. Noah stood nearby, eyes wide. What are his chances? Dr. Reed looked at Elaine, then at Noah. I don't deal in chances. I deal in work. And this, he gestured to Valor's wing, is going to take everything we've got. The operating room at the Carter Veterinary Clinic had never hosted anything as rare or important as a bald eagle. The steel table usually held golden retrievers recovering from surgeries or cats getting spayed. But today, under the soft glow of the battery-powered overhead lamp, it was prepared for something far more delicate. Reed stood at the head of the table, his hands scrubbed, eyes focused, the picture of calm intensity. Elaine stood beside him, assisting with tools and sutures. Noah was not allowed inside the sterile room, but he sat just outside the glass partition, his eyes locked on every movement, barely breathing. Valor lay sedated, his feathers gently ruffled, his head wrapped to block light from his eyes. A small oxygen mask covered his beak. His wing, exposed, prepped, and draped, was a mess of fractured bone, torn tendons, and bruised muscle. It was worse than Dr. Reed expected. I'll have to install a custom pin, he murmured. Too much displacement for a standard one. The humerus is shattered in 2 places. Elaine handed him the instruments without hesitation. Her training wasn't specialized in avian orthopedics, but her experience in emergency trauma helped steady the process. The first hour passed in silence, save for the rhythmic beeping of the vital signs monitor and the gentle clinking of surgical tools. Dr. Reed inserted the titanium pin slowly, aligning the fragments of bone with surgical precision. He's lucky it missed the joint. If that had shattered too, he'd never fly again, Elaine finished for him. Noah, sitting behind the glass, didn't hear the words, but he read their lips. His hands were clenched into fists on his knees. After 2 hours, the bone was stabilized. Dr. Reed began the process of sewing back torn muscle. The bleeding was minimal now, the tissue cool and pliable. Every stitch mattered. Every fraction of a millimeter could determine whether the wing would move naturally again or remain a useless appendage. He's tolerating it well, Elaine said quietly, glancing at the monitor. Strong heart rate. Good, Dr. Reed replied, because now comes the hard part. He began the micro-reconstruction of the ligament clusters, delicate work requiring magnification and precision tools. They had to restore not just strength, but elasticity. If the wing was too tight, Valor wouldn't stretch it fully. Too loose, and he'd lose control during flight. 3 hours passed, then 4. By the time the final stitch was in place, the clinic's backup generator was flickering, and the room smelled faintly of antiseptic and sweat. Dr. Reed peeled off his gloves and stepped back, letting out a long breath. Done. Elaine sagged slightly with relief. You think it will hold? If he heals like most juveniles do, yes. But flight isn't guaranteed. They transferred Valor to a recovery enclosure, his wing carefully wrapped and immobilized with a custom brace. The anesthesia would wear off slowly. Noah stood at the glass, pale but hopeful. Can I see him? Elaine opened the door. You've earned it. He stepped into the room quietly, like entering a church. He knelt beside the enclosure, looking at the eagle. So vulnerable, wrapped in gauze and tape, breathing deeply in unconsciousness. You did it, he whispered. We did it. Later that evening, Elaine tucked a blanket over Noah where he had fallen asleep on a clinic couch, still wearing his sneakers, one hand hanging off the side. Dr. Reed sat beside her, sipping lukewarm coffee. He's got heart, that kid. Elaine nodded. He always has. But something about this eagle. He's changed since finding him. Dr. Reed looked through the glass toward the recovery room. Sometimes we find the thing that shows us who we are before we're old enough to understand it. Valor woke just before dawn. He stirred groggily, muscles twitching. His head lifted slightly, then dropped again. But his eyes opened, slowly, then sharply. He blinked at the unfamiliar room, at the walls, at the soft glow of a nightlight near the floor. And then he saw Noah. The boy was sitting beside him, barely awake, but smiling. "You're back," Noah whispered. "Welcome back." For days after the surgery, Valor remained still, resting, healing. The painkillers helped, but there was a restless energy in his eyes. Noah noticed it on the third day. A twitch in the talons, a small attempt to lift the head higher, as if Valor were testing his limits. Elaine kept a strict recovery schedule, daily checkups, pain management, adjustments to the brace. They couldn't remove it yet. His wing needed more time, but Dr. Reed, before leaving back to Monroe, had left instructions for weekly evaluations. "He's healing," Elaine said one evening as she and Noah watched the eagle eat a full portion of rabbit meat. "And if it continues like this, maybe flight tests in 3 months." Noah's heart lifted, but he kept it quiet. "Will we be the ones to release him?" Elaine hesitated. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether he's strong enough, and whether the wildlife department lets us." Noah nodded solemnly. "We have to try." And so they did. 3 weeks had passed since the surgery, and the Carter Veterinary Clinic had settled into a rhythm, quiet, focused, and oddly shaped around the needs of a single recovering eagle. Valor was no longer the helpless, broken creature they'd found beneath the mossy cypress. He was alert now, proud. His head tracked movement with precision, his eyes sharp and intelligent. He no longer flinched at noise or light. But most importantly, he had begun to test himself. It started with the talons, flexing, stretching, gripping at the towel beneath him. Then the neck, turning faster and more naturally each day. Eventually, he began to shift his weight between legs, standing more often, preening the parts of his feathers he could reach. Noah documented every movement in a small spiral notebook titled Valor's Flight Log. Inside, he made sketches, notes, dates, and tiny stars for what he called big days. One star marked the first full meal eaten without assistance. Another was for the first time Valor stood without swaying. The latest star was bold and double outlined. Today he flared his wing. It had happened just after noon. Noah was crouched near the enclosure, offering fresh strips of fish, when Valor made a sharp movement. His good wing flared fully, an impressive, majestic span of feathers. But the injured one lifted halfway, still wrapped in the supportive brace. It trembled, awkward and uncertain, but it moved. Elaine, standing behind her son, was quiet for a moment before she said, "It's a start." Noah turned to her, eyes wide. "That's the first time, Mom. He's going to fly again. I can feel it." Elaine didn't answer right away. She had spoken earlier that morning to the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. They were planning to move Valor to an official rehabilitation center in Baton Rouge. It had better equipment, a large flight barn, and certified handlers who specialized in eagles. It was, by every account, the best thing for him. But she hadn't told Noah yet. "How soon can we remove the brace?" he asked eagerly. Elaine refocused. "Another week, maybe 10 days. But we'll have to be cautious. The pin needs to settle before he starts fully extending." Noah nodded. "I want to be there when he stretches both wings. I want to be the first person he sees when he finally flies." Elaine felt a strange ache in her chest. That night, long after Noah had gone to bed with his notebook beside him, Elaine sat in her small office and reread the email from the Wildlife Services. The transfer was scheduled for the following Friday. They had arranged for a specialized crate, a driver, and a representative from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to supervise. "Due to the protected status of Haliitis leucocephalus," it read, "and the medical history of this subject, we strongly recommend transferring him to the Certified Avian Rehabilitation Facility at the Louisiana Raptor Center." Elaine understood. Legally and professionally, it made sense. But emotionally? She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. It's what's best for him, she told herself. But the thought of separating Valor from Noah, of ending what had become a powerful connection, hurt in a way she hadn't anticipated. The next morning, Elaine brought Noah into the break room after breakfast. He was still in pajamas, with bed hair and sleepy eyes, but he smiled the moment she said, "Valor." "I want to talk to you," she said gently, "about what comes next." He froze. Is he okay? He's okay. Better than okay. You've helped him heal. But there's something you need to understand. She sat across from him and took his hand. Noah, we're not licensed as a long-term rehabilitation center. We did what we could in an emergency, and it's been amazing. But now that he's stable, the state wants to move him to a facility with space to fly. Real flight space. Professionals who work with eagles every day. His face paled. You mean, he's leaving? Elaine hesitated. Yes. Next Friday. Silence. Noah pulled his hand back. I don't want him to go. I know. Neither do I. But he needs the best chance to return to the wild. But I'm the one who found him, he said, voice shaking. I've been with him every day. He knows me. He trusts me. That's true, she said softly. And it matters. But Valor's life isn't meant to be lived in a clinic or a town. He belongs in the sky. Tears welled in Noah's eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He stood up, fists clenched. Then I want to go with him. Noah, I'll volunteer. I'll sleep in their barn. I'll clean cages. Anything. You're 12. I don't care. He's my best friend. Elaine stood and wrapped her arms around him. I'm proud of you, but sometimes loving something means letting it go. He cried silently into her shoulder. Over the next few days, Valor continued to improve. The brace was loosened. Physical therapy began. Small stretches, assisted wing extensions, perch transitions. Noah was involved in all of it. Despite knowing their time was ticking, he spent every free moment with Valor. He read to him, fed him, sat near him doing homework. And at night he drew pictures. Of eagles in the sky, of forests, of rivers from above. In one picture, he drew himself with wings, flying beside Valor over the bayou. Elaine framed it and hung it on the clinic wall. Dr. Reed called to check in. Elaine gave a full report. He's healing, she said. Maybe better than expected. You know, he replied, sometimes the environment matters more than the surgery. Familiarity, trust, the right people, especially with intelligent creatures like eagles. Elaine paused. Would you recommend delaying the transfer? Officially? No. But off the record? I think he'd do just as well with you. She stared at the phone for a long time after the call ended. Was there a way to keep Valor just a little longer? The Louisiana air had shifted. Where weeks ago it had been humid, saturated with storm aftermath, now it carried a different charge. One of movement, transition. Something that smelled like approaching summer and felt like things beginning again. Valor had changed too. The brace was finally gone. Dr. Reed had given his distant approval via video consultation after reviewing updated x-rays. The bone had set, the pins were holding. The muscle tissue had reattached more cleanly than anyone had hoped. Valor's wing was still stiff, still wary, but it could open, fully, slowly, with strain and trembling effort, but unmistakably open. He tested it often now. At first, only during assisted sessions with Elaine, who would stretch the wing gently, soothing him as he tensed. Then came his first self-initiated extension. One sharp flare of both wings, pushing against gravity with almost defiant energy. That day earned another gold star in Noah's flight log. The enclosure, once a soft recovery space, had been transformed into a makeshift training pen. They rearranged it with different perches at increasing heights, hung small tree branches, and even installed a long padded ramp with a gentle slope to help him build leg strength. Noah had researched raptor recovery for hours. He printed pages, watched videos, and even emailed a biologist at the University of Louisiana, asking about muscular reconditioning in birds of prey. He needs vertical space, he told his mom one afternoon. Somewhere to launch from. Even if he's not flying yet, he has to get used to moving in 3 dimensions again. Elaine smiled. What do you suggest? Let's clear out the hay shed. It was a brilliant idea. The Carter property included a wide metal-roofed shed once used for hay storage. Now mostly empty, it was dusty, spacious, and tall, taller than the clinic ceilings by several feet. With some effort, they cleaned it out, added mats and soft landing zones, and built a series of platforms along one wall. By the end of the week, Valor had been moved in. He was suspicious at first, nervous in the new space, wings twitching as he hopped between low platforms. But soon, the potential awakened something ancient inside him. On the 3rd day in the shed, as Noah sat silently cross-legged near the far wall, Valor leapt from one ledge to another, 3 feet higher than before. It was not a glide. It was not flight. But it was the first time his body lifted from the ground. Meanwhile, pressure from the wildlife department intensified. Elaine had already postponed the transfer once, citing recovery complications. But now the Baton Rouge Raptor Center was calling directly. They had space ready, a technician, a schedule for his final flight trials. "We understand your emotional investment," the director said over the phone. "But we also have to follow process. This eagle is part of a protected recovery effort. He needs to be under our supervision for re-release." Elaine hung up, her heart sinking. Noah, who had overheard only fragments of the conversation, came to her late that night, holding Valor's logbook against his chest. "Are they taking him soon?" Elaine didn't lie. "Yes, maybe next week." Noah sat beside her on the clinic porch. The cicadas were loud, but the silence between them was louder. "I think he's almost ready to fly," Noah said. "But not yet. Just not yet." Elaine looked at her son, saw how much he had grown in just a few weeks, how deeply he loved, how fiercely he had committed to something so fragile. "Let me see what I can do," she said. That weekend, Noah built a large wooden perch himself, with his dad's old tools, hammering and sanding for hours. He placed it in the center of the hay shed, exactly 5 feet high, and laced the edge with rope for grip. "This is it," he told Valor the next morning, opening the shed door. "Today you go up there on your own." Valor studied the perch with narrowed eyes. Then, without waiting, he launched upward. It was awkward, wobbly. He missed the first time and fluttered to the ground. But on the second try, he made it. Wings flared, talons hooked, chest high. He looked like a king. By Monday, Elaine received another call, but this time from a journalist. Somehow, word had spread, first to a local birdwatching group, then to a regional wildlife blog. The story of the boy who rescued a bald eagle after a hurricane had captured imaginations. "They're asking if they can do a feature," Elaine said, hanging up. "It would bring attention. Maybe donations for rehab facilities. Maybe public interest." Noah looked up from where he was watching Valor preen under the skylight. "Do you think, if enough people cared, they'd let us keep him longer?" Elaine didn't answer. But the next day, a small news van arrived. The crew filmed footage of Valor moving between perches, the pinned wing now just slightly less graceful than the other. They interviewed Noah, who stood beside the eagle's enclosure with his notebook and spoke softly about the storm, the rescue, the recovery. "I think he wants to fly," he said. "Not just because he's supposed to, but because it's who he is." That quote ended up on the local evening news. It spread farther than anyone expected. 2 days later, the Carter Clinic received over 200 emails from teachers, bird lovers, veterans, even a former Air Force pilot, many urging the state to allow the Carter family to finish what they'd started. One letter read, "Sometimes the best medicine isn't in a facility. It's in being seen, being known. This eagle is already halfway to the sky. Don't clip him with paperwork." And still, Valor climbed higher. On the 10th day in the shed, he did something extraordinary. He opened both wings, flapped hard twice, then jumped, gliding nearly 15 feet to a platform on the opposite wall. It was silent in the shed after he landed. Then Noah dropped his notebook and shouted, "You did it! You flew!" Not far, not high, but he had flown. The shed had never felt so alive. The scent of fresh sawdust, the whir of air stirred by great wings, the sound of talons scraping against wood, it all pulsed with energy. It had become more than just a recovery space. It was a sanctuary, a secret airstrip built of hope and plywood. Valor had glided before, yes. He had moved from perch to perch with increasing confidence. But what happened on Thursday morning was something else entirely. It started like the others. Noah unlocked the shed door just after sunrise, stepping into the golden light that angled down through the skylights. He carried his notebook, a bowl of fresh rabbit meat, and his usual soft greeting. "Morning, big guy." Valor turned from the highest platform. He looked stronger now, more balanced. His eyes locked onto Noah's. Then, without warning, he spread both wings, stepped to the edge, paused, and jumped. But this time, he didn't just glide, he climbed. A full, mighty stroke of both wings launched him upward. His body lifted, curved into an arc, and carried him in a wide, graceful loop around the inside of the shed. He didn't stop after one flap. He flapped again, harder, higher, defying every ounce of gravity that had chained him for the last 5 weeks. Noah's breath caught. Valor completed the circle, swooped toward the perch, and missed it entirely. But instead of crashing, he twisted midair, adjusted, flared his wings, and landed awkwardly but upright on a lower beam. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't elegant. But it was flight. Noah ran to the platform, tears filling his eyes. "You flew. You really flew." Valor stood tall, panting slightly, chest rising and falling. His feathers ruffled, his beak parted, but his eyes burned with the fire of the sky. Elaine was in the clinic when she heard the door slam. "Mom!" Noah shouted. "He did it! He flew around the shed." Elaine dropped the vial of antibiotics she had been preparing and followed her son outside. "I'm serious," he said, still breathless. "Full wingspan. Not just gliding. Like, up and turning, and..." He corrected midair. Elaine stared at the shed. "Show me." They watched together. This time Valor waited. Then, sensing the expectation, he climbed again. 1 beat. 2. Then the upward burst. Less powerful than the first, but more controlled. Elaine gasped softly. "I don't believe it," she murmured. "That's real flight. Limited distance. But he's got his symmetry, his instincts, his control." Noah turned to her, his voice quiet. "Does this mean he's ready?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took out her phone. Later that evening, the director from the Raptor Center called. Elaine stood in her office, the door closed, voice low. "Yes," she said. "He flew today. In our shed." Pause. "No, not gliding. Full flaps. Lift. Redirection." Another pause. "I understand that. But I'm asking for a reconsideration. Just give us until the end of next week. We'll run our own flight tests. If he succeeds, we propose releasing him here. We have the forest, the bayou. He knows this land." Long silence. Then, "I'll need a report and a video." Elaine exhaled. "You'll have both tomorrow." The next day, Noah and Elaine filmed Valor from every angle. They used a drone for aerial shots, showing the shed layout. They recorded every jump, every beat of those dark-edged wings. And at the end of this video, Elaine included a short voiceover. "What you're seeing is not just recovery, it's memory, instinct reborn. This eagle didn't just heal, he remembered who he is. We ask that you let him finish that journey where it began." They submitted it that evening. 2 days passed. Noah barely slept. He visited Valor hourly. The eagle was flying more now, shorter bursts but cleaner, with smoother landings. His wing showed only the faintest hitch when he stretched it. The brace marks were gone. The pin had integrated. Then, on Monday morning, the call came. Elaine stepped out of her office with her phone still in her hand. Noah stood. "Well?" "They've agreed." He blinked. "What?" "They're going to let us release him here." Noah dropped his notebook. "Are you serious?" She smiled. "They said this kind of emotional connection, this level of progress, it's unusual. They want a final test flight, one done outdoors. If it goes well, Valor stays free." The next challenge was finding the right spot. They chose a clearings on the edge of Kisatchie Forest, just past the marshlands where Noah had first spotted him weeks earlier. It was flat, wide, surrounded by tall pines and open sky. They cleaned the area, brought medical gear just in case, and built a temporary launch platform from crates and plywood. The release was scheduled for Friday. That week felt like a countdown. Each day they trained in the shed. Valor flew between ledges, climbed, turned, landed. He stumbled once on Wednesday and twisted his talon, but recovered quickly. By Thursday, he was flying entire loops without hesitation. Noah didn't speak much that night. He sat beside Valor until after dark, feeding him by hand, touching the edge of his feathers one last time. "You ready?" he asked. Valor didn't blink. He simply looked toward the skylight, where stars glittered through the glass. Friday morning arrived with a cool breeze and clear skies. They transported Valor in a travel crate lined with soft pine needles. Elaine drove slowly, while Noah sat in the back, whispering steady reassurances. At the clearing, 2 officials from the wildlife department waited, clipboard in hand, quiet, observant. Elaine nodded to them, then turned to Noah. "This is your moment," she said. Together they opened the crate. Valor stepped out slowly, talons gripping the soft earth, wings tucked tightly against his body. He stood still for a long moment, as if tasting the wind. Then, suddenly, he flared both wings. Noah stepped back. "Go," he whispered. Valor bent his knees and launched. Up, over the treetops, wings pumping. He rose like a phoenix. The clearing fell into silence after Valor disappeared over the treetops. For a few seconds, there was only the sound of wind rustling through the tall grass, the breathless hush of those watching, and the echo of wings that had left the earth behind. Noah stood frozen, head tilted back, following the disappearing silhouette of the eagle as it rose into the endless Louisiana sky. For a moment, it was just a dark spot against a sea of blue. Then even that was gone. Elaine placed a hand on her son's shoulder. "He did it," she whispered. But Noah didn't answer. His chest swelled with something larger than joy, larger than sadness, too. It was a mixture of awe and ache, of knowing he had helped someone he loved to leave him. The officials from the wildlife department conferred quietly behind them. "That was a clean launch," one said. "Full power, solid symmetry." "And trajectory?" "Excellent." Elaine turned. "So?" The woman, Ms. Janelle Marsh, a stern but fair conservation officer, checked her clipboard. This was the final requirement. He passed. Elaine looked to Noah. "You hear that?" Still, he didn't answer. His eyes searched the treetops, as if trying to catch a glimpse of the wings once more. "Will he come back?" he asked softly. "Maybe," Ms. Marsh said. "Juvenile eagles sometimes linger near their point of release for a few days or even weeks, but eventually they go." Elaine nodded. "And if he doesn't?" "Then he's where he belongs." They left the clearing an hour later, after checking the skies one last time. Valor did not return that day, nor the next. Noah kept visiting the clearing at sunrise and sunset. He left scraps of fish on the platform, even though he knew a healthy eagle didn't need handouts. But it made him feel closer, like a tether that hadn't fully been cut. On Sunday morning, 3 days after the release, something changed. He was sitting on a stump near the platform, his logbook on his lap, sketching the outline of a soaring eagle. The air was still, the sky cloudless, no sign of wings. Then, a shadow passed overhead. Noah looked up sharply. There he was. Valor circled once, high, then dipped lower. His cry, a sharp, echoing scream, sliced through the air like a signal flare. It was the first time Noah had ever heard his voice. It was not a call for help. It was a declaration. "I am free." Noah stood, trembling, and lifted his hand. "Hi," he whispered. Valor flew one wide arc over the clearing, then another, lower, slower. Finally, he angled his wings and descended toward the platform. He didn't land on it. He landed next to it, awkwardly, but upright. Noah didn't move. Valor stared at him, head tilted, eyes gleaming. Then, slowly, he walked forward and bowed his head slightly. Not submission, not pain, recognition. Noah couldn't speak. He knelt down, just out of reach, and opened his notebook. He tore out the latest page, a drawing of Valor in flight, surrounded by stars. He folded it carefully and placed it on the edge of the platform. "Just so you remember," he said quietly. Valor stared for a few more moments. Then, with one powerful leap, he took to the air again. And this time, he didn't circle back. That evening, the house felt quieter than usual. Elaine found Noah in the living room, curled up on the couch with his sketch pad, watching a muted nature documentary. The screen showed Osprey diving for fish. Noah wasn't really watching. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "You miss him?" "I don't know if I miss him," he said slowly. "I think I miss what it felt like when he needed me." Elaine sat beside him. "That doesn't go away. You helped him survive. That stays with both of you, even if you're not near each other." Noah turned to her. "Do you think he'll be okay out there, alone?" Elaine paused. "He's not alone, not really. There are other eagles, a whole sky full of them." Noah looked back at the TV. "Yeah, but they didn't hold his wing when it was broken." That night, after Noah had gone to bed, Elaine went into his room to check on him. She found his sketchpad open on the desk. On the last page, in pencil, he had written, "He was never mine to keep, just mine to help." 3 weeks passed. Valor was spotted twice by local birders near the southern bayou, once diving toward the water, and once perched on a snag tree with a fresh fish in his talons. The photos were blurry but unmistakable. The scar on his left wing was visible, a faint, healed line where the brace had once been. Elaine printed the photo and pinned it to the clinic bulletin board. "Recovered, released, reported alive," she wrote in red ink beneath it. Noah didn't say much when he saw it, but that night he drew a new picture. Valor soaring above the clouds, a ribbon trailing from his leg. On the ribbon were written the words, "Home is the sky." Then, unexpectedly, something new arrived. A large manila envelope, addressed to Noah Carter. Inside was a letter from the Louisiana Raptor Center. It included a certificate of appreciation, a wildlife stewardship award, and a personal invitation to spend the summer as a youth intern. "They said they want me to help with injured birds," he told his mom, barely hiding his smile. "Not just eagles, owls, hawks, falcons. They said I have the instincts of a handler." Elaine hugged him. "You earned that." They even asked if I'd give a talk about Valor. "Will you?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, but not just about how we fixed him. I want to talk about what it means to let something go when it's ready, even if you're not." Summer in Louisiana had always felt like a living thing, thick, hot, buzzing with life and secrets. The cicadas cried louder, the air pressed closer to your skin, and everything smelled like river water and sunlight. For Noah, this summer would become a season he would remember for the rest of his life. The Louisiana Raptor Center stood just outside Baton Rouge, tucked into a patch of preserved wetlands and oak forest. It was a sprawling campus, half medical facility, half sanctuary, with high-ceilinged barns, rehabilitation enclosures, education classrooms, and a long boardwalk that wound through cypress trees and murky ponds. Noah arrived on the first Monday of June, backpack slung over one shoulder, holding a small duffel of clothes and his ever-present sketchbook. He was greeted by a woman named Jessa Klein, the youth program coordinator, who offered a kind smile and a laminated name badge. "You're the youngest intern we've ever had," she said, leading him toward the orientation room, "but also the only one who helped save a bald eagle before they turned 13. Noah blushed but smiled. His first week was filled with wonder. He learned how to clean flight cages, how to record daily health observations, how to prepare specific diets for owls versus falcons, and how to calm an anxious kestrel using soft vocal cues and a steady hand. He took to it like he'd been doing it all his life. Every night he'd write in his notebook under the dim bunkhouse lights, sometimes notes on bird anatomy, sometimes sketches of feather formations, and sometimes just memories of valor. His name came up often. By the end of week 2, he had gained permission to assist in the restricted wing, where the most vulnerable birds were kept. There he met Luna, a snowy owl recovering from a wing fracture, and Jasper, a red-tailed hawk with partial blindness. He connected with them in the same way he had connected with Valor, quietly, patiently, like a boy who had learned the language of flight without ever leaving the ground. One morning, while he was helping with post-op treatments, Jessa approached him with a clipboard. "Hey, we've got a visitor," she said. "Someone dropped off a patient at the main intake who asked for you specifically." Noah looked up, puzzled. "Me?" Jessa nodded. "You'll want to come see this." He followed her across the facility, heart beating faster. It wasn't unusual for locals to bring in injured birds, but someone asking for him? That was new. As he stepped into the shaded intake porch, he saw a man standing beside a transport crate. Tall, with a gray beard and sun-leathered skin. He wore boots caked in river mud and a U.S. Fish and Wildlife cap. "Noah Carter?" the man asked. "Yes, sir." The man crouched beside the crate and opened the top. Noah gasped. Inside lay a juvenile bald eagle, about Valor's size when he'd first been rescued. The feathers were darker than a mature eagle's but glossy with health. The bird's eyes, however, were wide with stress, and a slight bruise marked one side of the beak. "We pulled him out of a net trap down near Darbon again," the man said. "Caught his talon, poor thing. Didn't break anything, just bruised and spooked." Noah dropped to his knees beside the crate. "Is it?" The man nodded. "We scanned the ID tag, same one as before. It's your bird." "Valor." He didn't cry, but something like a tidal wave rolled through him. Valor, now larger, broader, with a fuller wingspan and brighter feathers, looked at him and blinked once. Long, slow, deliberate. He remembered. Over the next 4 days, Noah stayed close to Valor. Though the eagle was kept in a large recovery enclosure to rest, he didn't show signs of injury beyond minor swelling in his foot and slight dehydration. He responded quickly to food, resumed grooming on day 2, and flared his wings naturally when disturbed. Jessa watched the interaction between them with growing fascination. "He's calm with you," she said. "Most eagles hate being observed like this." Noah sat beside the mesh, speaking softly. "He's not afraid, just watchful." "And you?" Noah smiled. "I'm not afraid either. I think he came back on purpose." "You mean, to find you?" "Maybe not exactly," Noah said. "But maybe he was circling this way for a reason. Maybe eagles don't forget the people who helped them." Jessa paused. "What will you do if he's cleared for release again?" "I'll help him fly, just like last time. But if he wants to stay, I'll be here." Valor's re-release happened a week later. This time it was less formal. No officials, no clipboards. Just Noah, Jessa, and the same fish and wildlife officer, now relaxed and grinning. They returned to the edge of the swamp, just beyond the sanctuary. The air was warm. Dragonflies danced in the sun. Noah opened the crate. Valor stepped out, talons strong, stance steady. He blinked at the sky, then looked back once, directly at Noah. The moment stretched out like a rubber band about to snap. Then, with a cry that cracked through the stillness like thunder, he launched. Wings beat once, twice, and he was gone. That night, Noah didn't sleep. He lay in the bunkhouse, staring at the ceiling. He didn't feel empty. He didn't feel sad. Instead, he felt full, like every part of him was aligned with something he couldn't name. He understood now that this wasn't just about one bird. It was about all of them. Every injured wing, every flight regained. He closed his eyes and dreamed of feathers and rivers and sky. By the end of summer, the sanctuary felt like home. Noah had learned more in 3 months than most kids his age did in a year. He had handled owls, patched kestrels, treated parasites, fed hatchlings, and observed behaviors that textbooks couldn't describe. He could identify different raptor calls by sound alone. He had stopped flinching at blood, bones, and loss. But most of all, he had learned to see when a bird was in pain before it screamed, to see when it was ready to trust, when it needed space, when it was time to let go. On his final day as a youth intern, Jessa called him into the main office. She held an envelope in her hand. "Officially," she said, "this is your completion certificate. Unofficially." She smiled, tapping the table. "I think you should see what's inside." Noah opened it. Inside was a letter, not printed, but handwritten, on thick paper with a gold emblem at the top. It was from the National Raptor Recovery Initiative, based in Colorado. They had read about Valor, about Noah. The story had traveled farther than either of them realized. "Your name was submitted by the Louisiana Raptor Center for early mentorship consideration. We offer a specialized academic track for young handlers who demonstrate exceptional instinct, empathy, and commitment. We'd like you to visit our training campus next spring, with full sponsorship." Noah blinked. "Is this real?" he asked. Jessa nodded. "It's very real." He sat down, the letter in his hands, stunned. "You've got time to decide," she added. "But I'd say the sky's opening up for you, kid." He returned home to Calhoun in early September. The house felt smaller, the town quieter, but not in a sad way, like something paused, waiting for him to return with stories. Elaine hugged him at the door, barely holding back tears. "You're taller." "You say that every month." "Well, now it's true." That evening she made his favorite, crawfish étouffée, and they sat on the porch with bowls in their laps and soft music drifting through the screen door. "You changed," she said gently. "I hope so," Noah replied. "But I don't feel different. I just feel more me." She nodded. After dinner, he went into his room. Nothing had been touched. On the wall still hung his framed sketch of Valor flying above the clouds. Below it, the words, "Home is the sky." He smiled, sat down, and began to draw again. October came, then November. Noah stayed in touch with the sanctuary, sending in field notes and sketches by mail. He began giving talks at his middle school, at the town library, at the wildlife fair in Monroe, always about birds, about healing, about flight, always about Valor. And then, one chilly Sunday afternoon, the sky called back. Noah and Elaine had driven out to the edge of Kisatchie Forest, where the trees grew sparse and the wind swept low across the open fields. They brought thermoses of cocoa and blankets and sat near the same launch platform where Valor had first flown free. "I think about him all the time," Noah admitted. Elaine sipped her drink. "I do too." Then, from the corner of her eye, she spotted something moving through the clouds. Wings. Broad, dark-edged, unmistakable. He circled once, then again. Noah stood slowly. It had been months. Eagles were migratory, territorial. The chances of it being the same bird were low, but he knew. He felt it in his chest. Valor swooped low, then pulled up sharply, executing the same tight turn he had once struggled with in the hayshed. It was flawless now, confident, free. Noah raised his hand. For a heartbeat, Valor hovered in the wind above them, wings spread wide, body poised in the quiet between seconds. Then he let out a cry. Not a farewell, a greeting. "I remember." And then he was gone again. Not because he was leaving, but because he was meant to keep moving. That night, Noah lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He didn't need to draw anymore. Not tonight. The picture was already in his mind. A boy and a bird. A moment shared in silence. A memory held in flight. 2 years later, a national wildlife magazine published a full feature on the youngest eagle rehabilitation handler in the country. His name was Noah Carter. The article opened with a photo. A teenage boy, taller now, standing beside a chalkboard with sketches of wing mechanics drawn in white. Perched beside him was a broad-winged hawk in recovery. But in the bottom corner of the article, there was a different photo. One older, grainier. A bald eagle mid-flight, shadow stretching wide over a field of golden grass. The caption read, "Valor, released, recovered, returned." And beside it, in Noah's handwriting, "Some things are too wild to keep, but not too wild to love."